Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode. Today is a really special episode for me, specifically Matheus. And what about you?
Yeah, it is. It's a subject that I really love to talk about it. So talking about streaming, data streaming, and everything that orbits inside of this spectrum for me is always something good to talk about it.
Yeah. So without any further ado, let me ask Neha to introduce yourself. First, it's a pleasure to have you here in the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Yeah, me too. We are. I think we are. We're super excited. So, let me start by asking for you, Neha, give a little bit of introduction and a little bit about your technical background for the people, the Brazilian people.
Sure. So currently I am a founding engineer at this startup called StarTree. And StarTree is in the business so our vision is to democratize user-facing real-time analytics for all end users by providing blazing fast end-user analytics using Apache Pinot. So I am, since I talked about Apache Pinot, I'm one of the PMC and committers in the Apache Pinot project. I have made several contributions in the Apache Pinot project, right from real-time streaming ingestion side to ingestion transformation side, how to make data come into Pinot much easier. More recently in like the storage layer side, a little bit also dabbled in the query execution side. And my love for Pinot doesn't just stop at contributing and coding. I love doing advocacy and evangelism for Pinot in the form of writing blogs, or I love to make entertaining video tutorials for users, or just coming onto platforms and shows like these and sharing my experiences and what's up and happening in Pinot. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wow. And I think it's exciting for you right now because Tim Berglund joined the club, right?
Yes, that has been super exciting for us to happen. He joined us about early this year, and we've been collaborating with him when he was still in Confluent, where we were doing these Kafka Pinot talks, and now it's just surreal that he's on board at StarTree and doing all the exciting things and videos and everything really that he brings with it.
Yeah, I think it's helping companies to understand how important Pinot is, how big like the user-facing interface is becoming more and more important nowadays. So yeah, that's a really good thing. I saw that in your extensive career that you moved from Yahoo to LinkedIn and then eventually became like the founding engineer at StarTree. Can you just describe a little bit about your time on Yahoo and LinkedIn and how you became like a PMC committer in the end of the day, and why the idea to build StarTree from scratch?
Sure. So I was in grad school when I got an internship at Yahoo, actually, and I joined the team that was building or managing the data infra and the platform for an ad serving system. And there that was like my first exposure to all the big data technologies. It was pretty exciting for me to sit. So where I was sitting, I was surrounded by people who were actually responding and solving issues in the MapReduce, Hadoop, and Pig, the tickets that were happening online. I used to sometimes file a ticket and see somebody sitting behind me has just responded to the ticket. It was like pretty cool for me. And then after that, I joined LinkedIn because at that time, LinkedIn's data infra was like a really awesome place to be, with all these open source technologies being formed at LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn's culture of really just wanting to open source and share all these technologies with everybody. So there was Kafka, then there was Samza, and then Pinot, and then Goblin. So pretty much anything that you wanted in your whole data ecosystem end to end, there was some cool, exciting, cutting edge thing happening for that at LinkedIn. And being open source, it was like a really wonderful place to be for a data engineer and a big data enthusiast. And when I was at LinkedIn, I first joined this team called Third Eye. So Third Eye was this root cause analysis and anomaly detection platform for LinkedIn's business metrics. And Third Eye at that time was built on top of Apache Pinot. And I was always super intrigued that, hey, this is like the anomaly detection platform. This is really cool. But what is this underneath Third Eye that is so fast, so picking fast that no matter what kind of dimensionality I put in the query or the amount of data that my anomaly detection monitoring piece is trying to query at one time, no matter how much historical trend it's trying to take, or even just how fresh the data is that is being served in this query dashboard or the anomaly dashboard. So I was like really intrigued with that. That's when I was introduced with Pinot. I was like, I really have to go and check what this underlying infra is. And that's how I was introduced to Pinot. And then I just been working.
You fell in love, right? You fell in love.
Yes. I was started working on Pinot, and it was really interesting to take something that was fast and then try to make it even faster. Like everything in Pinot is like, hey, let's optimize this even more. We have this log line in Pinot that says if the query takes more than 100 milliseconds, we log kind of, hey, slow query. So this was just like just crazy and amazing for me. And I just kept working more and more with Pinot. And then today I'm at StarTree with a bunch of people who I met in the Pinot team, and here we are.
Oh my God, I'm astonished now to hear you used to call slow queries at higher than 100 milliseconds. Come on, that's insane. What do you think about it? What is your take on that, Matheus?
That is something that we don't usually hear about it in other customers, for example, because when you say that's 100 milliseconds, it's a slow query for us, and many of companies, it's like a super blazing fast query. There's something that responds, but in the size of LinkedIn, makes sense to be like they have low latency. They have to respond quickly because the whole world are using like billions of users, so that's huge.
Yeah,
it must be challenging to do something like that.
Yeah, it must be super challenging. And adding on top of that, 100 milliseconds, it doesn't sound slow, but if you just put like a lot of sessions, couple of hundred and couple of thousand sessions per second, that could be like become bottleneck really soon, because there's a bunch of queries hitting the storage layer. So it's really interesting how the Pinot works actually. But yeah, we're gonna get in more details about it really soon. So, really important question for you that we as Brazilians would like to get more clarification about it. So, what is truly user-facing real-time analytics, and why should one care about it? What is the importance about it?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I love answering this question and just walking through what it used to be and now why suddenly this new thing has come up and why it is really important. So when analytics first became a thing, like let's say a decade or a couple of decades ago, it was only available to execs and CEOs in boardrooms who got, say, daily or weekly printed reports. And then as we got technology evolved a little more and we got data warehouses and data lakes, analytics started becoming more available for more internal users of a company. For example, for analysts or PMs who are looking at internal dashboards, or for data scientists who are trying to run ad hoc queries for their experiments and for training their models. But then this all is still internal analytics. It's all for the internal stakeholders of a company. And most companies have stopped here today. User-facing analytics is going one step further, where you provide analytics to the end users and customers of your products. So the people who are actually using your data products, who are using your apps and generating this data, exposing this analytics to these users, putting all this data in their hands. And the next part is like, why should we do this? because important decisions are to be made by all users. Like, we are shifting away from the age where we're saying that only these few internal stakeholders have important decisions to make. It's everybody, somebody who's writing a blog, online shoppers, people who are ordering food. They need to know in real time, what's the status, what are the trends. Somebody who's managing a restaurant and managing an online delivery service for the evening, they need to know what's the pulse of their service in real time to make important decisions about their service. So basically, we're shifting away from just keeping it internally. And then as a business, if you are able to provide such embedded analytics on your user-facing products, it's going to help you take your product experience to the next level and unlock a lot of value for your customers. So to give you some examples, I talked about the ordering food and meal delivery. So Uber Eats is one classic example of user-facing real-time analytics. So as a diner, you get to see in real-time orders happening near you. So you will kind of be able to tell, hey, is some particular restaurant offering some offers today, or is some kind of food trending today, and do you want to hop onto that bandwagon? Or as a restaurant owner, they have a product called Uber Eats Restaurant Manager, where in real time you're able to see the status of your orders, menu item feedback, or just basically gauge the sense of how your service is doing and make some critical changes in real time, instead of, say, receiving a report tomorrow that, hey, your revenue was down because of some particular dimension of your data set not behaving as usual. Another great example is just, if you go onto LinkedIn, it's full of user-facing analytics all over the website. The flagship product was like, who viewed your profile? So you can just go and in real time see your views, slice and dice into them by dimensions like country, job title, company. So all this like really helps with user engagement and just a better product experience.
Wow. That's pretty enlightening. When we started to see about Pinot, we saw it was actually the technology behind LinkedIn. That was pretty impressive because we were wondering how queries could be so fast in Kafka, because we mainly know that LinkedIn runs a bunch of Kafka clusters underneath the hood. So
Right.
we kind of asking about how that would be possible to query in Kafka, because like 2-3 years ago we were talking about that, because we know that Kafka is pretty efficient in terms of getting this append log immutable only record style. But in terms of querying the data, is not meant for that. So you have to have some engine behind the scenes doing that hard lifting, and seeing that Pinot's way. And I don't remember, but it's not that old that Pinot became like Apache Spark, Apache. They went
top level project.
It became the top level project. It's been like less than a year, or 1 year and a half, right?
Yeah, probably a year and a half. You're right.
A year and a half. And after becoming like the top level project, we saw now StarTree just gaining a lot of traction, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I love to see that how Pinot is just playing this bigger role in Uber Eats and LinkedIn, and we have other customers using that like Stripe, and there's a lot of other ones playing with different types of that. So what was your first site? I think you talk a little bit about your first site was when you're in the team of the what's the name of the team again?
The third eye.
The third eye. And interesting this name because it rings some bells, because Pinot offers like an integration with third eye module, which is the anomaly detection. So I would assume that this is what's your team in the time.
That is correct. I was in the third eye team, and at that time it was in the same repo as Pinot, and it was pretty much we were. Even now, the integration is like pretty well done, and it's kind of one of the go-to solutions for anomaly detection on top of Pinot.
That's interesting. So question. That's interesting. I think we are kind of really interested to know what's the story behind the creation of Pinot. Can you just because you've been in so you may know how what was
Yes, and this is a really nice story. So for this, we have to kind of take a flashback to about 2010, 2011, and at that time, LinkedIn was just this website for job seekers and to kind of update your resume. There was no feed and no engagement beyond job updates. It wasn't this vibrant social media platform that it is today. And it was super important for LinkedIn to change from that and increase the engagement. So one of the apps at that time, as I mentioned, who viewed my profile, was already there at that time, but it was very static. You could just see a historical trend of your profile views as a line chart, and that's pretty much it. So then kudos to the product managers actually were at LinkedIn at that time for coming up with the idea of bringing in real-time data and real-time interactive analytics to this experience. So like if you go on it today, like we discussed, you can see your real-time views to the nearest second, and you have the control to slice and dice into those views. So this product was introduced at that time, and this product was a huge success, and it immediately helped increase profile views, invites, connections. But on the infra side, the story was like very different. So the initial version of Who Viewed My Profile, which was powered by, at that time, we used to call it Pinot 1.0. So at that time, this Pinot was designed like a search-based system. So it was built on top of Lucene, and to just power Who Viewed My Profile with a few hundred of QPS, hundreds of queries per second, it took this 1,000-node cluster. And it was an operational nightmare. It was just not scaling beyond that for more QPS. And most of the infra team just wanted to roll back the product. And they were like, no, this is not working out from the infra side. Can we just like take this product down? But the management was really insistent on finding a way to handle this because the metrics showed like a totally different story. And the metrics said that, no, this is the way to go for LinkedIn. So initially, we did take a look at other options. There was nothing quite like it to handle the amount of queries per second for like a LinkedIn level, like a web scale application, and the ingestion rates that were coming in because we were collecting all the real-time data from all users that were on the platform. And for the amount of dimensionality that came with like member data. And then because you wanted your end users to interact with it, you needed like super low latency so that you can do interactive level queries. So we tried to look for other systems, but then any search-based system was immediately out because as we had seen with the experience of Pinot 1.0, search-based systems, they tend to rely heavily on inverted indexes, and then they weren't really good for low latency aggregations after applying the inverted indexes. Then the other option was like a key value store. But then we wouldn't have been able to get the freshness we needed because of the time spent in pre-computations, and it would have been operationally heavy. Then there was systems like Presto or BigQuery. But then again, these are known to have tens of seconds of latency and not really something that you can build an interactive web scale dashboard with. So that's when we decided to build Pinot. And then after the Pinot, at that time, the Pinot 2.0 was rolled out. The number of nodes was reduced from 1,000 to just 75. And today it's actually served with just tens of nodes with some thousands of queries per second.
Wow, I don't know what to say. That's a beautiful story. I mean, the explanation behind, that's beautiful, truly, because the explanation behind the whys about why you guys had to follow the direction to build something by your own, it's just amazing. Like the explanation behind the key value pair, the freshness of the data on BigQuery or modern data warehouse systems that would not be able to be suffice on the freshness and the speed of the data and the pace of the data. That's incredible. Actually, I'm just kind of shocked with a lot of how you were able to cram so much information like input of minutes, pretty interesting. Just like yeah, you gotta take me some time to digest that, but it totally makes sense. And another thing that you said that's pretty interesting is about the inverted index right after the you can not compress the data, but you just make analytics on top of that. So is this something that majority of the inverted indexes struggles today? Once you apply the inverted index, the right after process to group the data is a little bit overhead. This is a normal thing.
So the inverted indexes is great. So even in Pinot, we do have inverted indexes. But relying solely on inverted indexes was the reason why we couldn't use search-based systems. Because in those systems, you just have to find the documents and then pretty much retrieve them and display them. But in Pinot, inverted indexes are still used in many use cases to find the documents. But after that, to do the fast aggregations, that's where you can't rely just on inverted indexes. And then there's many cases where just an inverted index is also not enough to retrieve or find your document set. So for both these kind of problems in Pinot, we have many more specialized indexes. Like we have range indexes for range queries or geospatial indexes for queries that have like geo coordinates. And then on top of all these specialized indexes for the fast, for getting your number of documents to aggregate, we have another very special index called StarTree index, which helps with super fast aggregations. So
even more. That's even more. So
yeah.
if you add StarTree, okay, that's only available in StarTree implementation?
No, so StarTree index is actually in the open source Apache Pinot, and it has been for several years now.
Interesting. Okay, it rings another bell. Is name of the company not because of the index, but it has somehow relates to the name?
Yes, it is exactly why the company was using StarTree, because this is a very unique index. It's an index that is not in any other system, and it kind of maybe if I explain a little bit of what StarTree does, it
please, yes,
kind of helps you achieve this sweet spot between, let's say you had a key value store where you pre-aggregate everything and materialize every possible dimension. But then that's going to give you like this explosion of storage, and it's also operationally complex. On the other end of the spectrum, you have, okay, I'm going to pre-aggregate nothing, and I'm just going to do everything on the fly. But then that's storage overhead, operational overhead is low, but then of course, query time is going to be slower. But then StarTree is an index which lets you pick your overhead between these two extremes. It will let you decide exactly which columns you want to pre-aggregate and up to how many documents you want to pre-aggregate, exactly which aggregations you want to store. So this kind of helps you a lot in, say, point queries or like fast drill down, slicing and dicing and lookup kind of queries. So yeah, this is like a unique index to Apache Pinot, and we thought it was apt that we named our company after one of our favorite indexes.
Wow. Just now we found the reason why StarTree now, Mateus. That's big. Interesting, yeah. Pretty interesting. So it lets you to decide whether or not you're gonna, it lets you, it gives you the ability to choose between how much you'd like to optimize that specific query in terms of storage or how fast it's gonna hit you. That's pretty cool actually. So it gives like the sweet spot. You can choose, right? It just enables you to do that. Yeah, go ahead, Mateus.
Yeah, moving on the questions, I have one that is on top of my head. And Neha, I was talking to Luan 2 years ago when we were working with Apache Druid, and we have several customizations to do. And I recall that he said to me, okay, we have this new kid on the block that for us is a new kid. There is Apache Pinot. There was an incubator that at that time was was, how can I say, in the beginning of the open source community in our perspective. And then for the 2 years from now, it has like the growing adoption, the community has grown more and more. And I want to know your take on that. How as so fast he gets his adoption of the big engineers, and the community has grown even more and more. And we are there from the beginning, so we see how much has been growing.
Yeah, so this is the Apache Pinot community is one of my favorite things to talk about, because even we are kind of really amazed at how the community really grew, and just the amount of growth that has happened in, say, like the last 2.5 to 3 years. So, like, flashback again to, say, 3 years ago. That time we had like a few success stories, like LinkedIn, of course, was one, and Uber was another one. And then there was adoption from like maybe 5 or 6 other companies. And then while these LinkedIn and Uber success stories were great, both these companies were mature data orgs, and they had like teams to handle everything that came with running a service like these, for the deployments, for the operations, for ingestion, etc. But out in the wild, it was a different story for Pinot. There was less control, more variability, more diversity in the number of sources that people wanted to use. So about 3 years ago, when a few of us got together at StarTree, we took a really deep look at what were the problems being faced by the community and how can we really help the community succeed. So we invested a lot of time in identifying and fixing the gaps, such as like the very basic thing, the getting started experience was not quite great. So Pinot was like built for production quality systems to run these hundreds of thousands of queries per second and like milliseconds latency SLAs, but it was not very developer friendly at that time. So that was like one of the things we really focused on. Then all these deployments at that time, LinkedIn, Uber, were on-prem deployments, but the community was headed towards cloud native support. So we had to make sure that we are able to provide support for Kubernetes-based deployments. And then also in like these companies, the sources where data was available used to be very predictable. Like the data lake was, say, HDFS, and the streaming source was Kafka. But the community wanted lots of different sources like Kinesis, Event Hubs, and data lake could be S3, Azure Data Lake. And we wanted to support all these, but we had to ensure that we don't duplicate the code or have to touch the core workings of the system every time we're adding a new source. And we wanted to make it very easy for an external contributor to quickly just come and add like another plugin with their knowledge of, like, say, S3, without having to know too much about, hey, what's Pinot going to do with that? So we needed strong abstractions. We focused a lot on making Pinot like really pluggable. And then with that, we started getting so many contributions for connectors like Kinesis and Pulsar and the GCS data lake support. We got integrations, pretty interesting integrations, like there's now a Pinot Flink sync. And there is like this recipe that one of the community members has written for integrating with change data capture systems like Debezium. And then on the visualization layer, we have connectors for Superset. One is being added right now for Tableau. So overall, like that process and then the community like really together just helped just grow really well in the past 3 years. So we started with like about 100 members 2.5 years ago, and now we're nearing 3,000 members, which is super awesome.
That's
and
insane.
we realized that if you just help the community out a little bit, the community would help us back a lot. They used to help us with documentations, come speak at our meetups, write blogs, and then just in general, brainstorm with their use cases, give us ideas, give us feedback about what the roadmap should be. So I guess all these factors together just helped the Pinot community flourish the way it is today.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of saying like flourish, because yeah, I mean personally, when I we were struggling. Honestly, we were struggling like big time because we provide a solution called Orion. It's pretty much a managed solution for customers of small and mid-sized companies. Just pretty much it give us access to their Kubernetes clusters such as AKS, EKS, and GKE. And then we just pretty much deploy using Terraform, customizing all the scripts. We deploy entire big data stack, such as Kafka, using Stringy, we just use Spark Operator, MinIO, Yoga by DB, just a bunch of stuff. And on the lab system front, we started our journey in Apache Druid, which sound in the time that we just opt for that one, sounds really mature in terms of deployment, UI, visualizations, and stuff like that. But we just faced like tons of problems because we didn't have like too much the community helping us, and Druid was meant for be more bare metal and VMs based rather than cloud native approach. And that was like a tipping point because I was just looking about that and found Pinot and say, oh my God, that's the equivalent, that's the guy that's gonna work against Druid. Yes, that is. So I just went into the documentation. I saw that it was supporting Kubernetes deployment, and it took me honestly like 25 minutes, whatever, to put it in a Molly's quick start demo. And then I ran and I started trying to integrate Pinot with Kafka. Then I went into the community, I signed up, and then after 1 hour, I was able to ingest the data. And it's funny because I talked to you, actually. You helped me to kind of, I don't know if you remember that, but it was you that helped me to create the spec that ingests data from Kafka into Pinot. And that was pretty interesting because we were able to sort problems, like small problems in a short period of time. And that was just pretty amazing for us. And then we said, okay, our next direction is going to be leaning towards Pinot. We start moving away from Druid and just go more to Pinot. And that's been our journey. We are really just working Pinot on Kubernetes. And that's gonna, I think, brings the next question. So can you just enlighten us a little bit about, bare metal VMs or Kubernetes and, how you guys made it possible to deploy, for example, Pinot, which is really complex system on top of Kubernetes. And if you guys are using StarTree something, or if you guys know customers that are using Kubernetes as the principal base deployment on Pinot.
Yes, so it was actually not super hard to go from bare metal to Kubernetes. The components, like the architecture of Pinot, was actually pretty well done already. Like we had separate components, and there was like clean separation. There was clear separation between, hey, what's the storage layer? Who does the serving? How are the interactions handled with, like, say, Helix? Where is like the metadata kept? So it was pretty much a matter of just coming up with the Helm chart, testing it out, and then we were good to go. So I think it was like some really good architectural decisions made very early on, which was kind of pretty easy to go from bare metal deployment to cloud-based, cloud-native deployment.
That's interesting. So do you see customers using Kubernetes, or do you think it's just still slowing in terms of deploying on that?
Yes. So actually lately, I don't remember seeing anybody trying to do bare metal, maybe barring like a few on and off, like maybe a handful of folks. Pretty much everyone else or any of our customers definitely are using Kubernetes-based deployments.
Wow, that's amazing, because Matheus and I, we are actually building up like a book called Harnessing Big Data on Kubernetes, and we are actually proving to the people that it's possible to build large systems inside of Kubernetes. And one of the topics that we are using to discuss is going to be Pinot as well. So that's the platform that we choose to put inside of Kubernetes and just show the entire deployment working since ingestion up to serving layer. So that's we are kind of, when you just actually accepted the invitation, was more a personal question about, it works really obvious in Kubernetes because we are deploying Kubernetes, but we'd like to hear from others if they are leaning towards Kubernetes. So it's amazing
that's
to hear
really
that.
exciting. Thanks for sharing, and also sharing your story of how you found Pinot and adopted it. And really glad that the community and the documentation were of help to you.
And the best part of the story is yet to come because we are pushing in Brazil a lot about Pinot. So we have lives about Pinot, we have documentation putting out for the Pinot community. Is just working about Pinot. We have some customers using Pinot in Brazil. So I would like to give you some names and maybe connect with them later. So I think it's going to be a good opportunity to you to talk about stuff like that. Like big companies are starting to use Pinot on Kubernetes. So I think that's a big thing as well for the Apache Pinot in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like you already mentioned some of the companies and the industries broadly. So all of them are already using Kubernetes-based deployments. Like in fintech, we have Stripe or DoorDash, also in food delivery. And then in retail, we're seeing some pretty big deployments at, say, Walmart and Target and Guitar Center. So in general, it's been pretty exciting. And
Yeah, we are super excited to hear that too. Sometimes we don't have this broad visibility, but it's amazing to connect with you and hear that people is just leaning towards, because that's what we truly believe for the new century, for the upcoming years, is to have everything inside of Kubernetes. Since we already have stateless applications, why not to have stateful applications inside of Kubernetes too? So we think it's going to be like, I think the next wave that is happening for customers. Even though I honestly, personally don't see companies like startups becoming like huge tech companies or becoming like just pretty centric if they not bad in data, being centric, the most important piece of the company. Thus, I think pretty much whenever you're just building a software that's going to work in any cloud and stuff like that, I don't see anything else rather than Kubernetes. So it totally makes sense that.
yeah,
Go ahead,
and
Mel.
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, he's finished.
Please,
Can say,
finish.
please continue.
Yeah, so I thought I heard you say that it should be applicable even to stateful systems. And I actually wanted to explain a little bit there that every component in Pinot is actually completely stateless. So we use kind of Helix and Zookeeper to drive what each component that joins what role they should play. And it is pretty elastic that way, pretty easy for components to just scale out, scale in, and kind of the whole state of the system is managed by Helix, and no single component really has to hold on to any state. And that's, I think, one of the reasons also why it was very easy for us to, again, one of the architectural decisions which helped us very easily move from bare metal to...
That's interesting. So that's wicked fast. It's truly wicked fast. Whenever you try to deploy, it's just like ridiculous how fast it is to spin up and just make all the components up. But I do have a question now that you're touching that point. So why you guys picked Helix? Because Helix is not, I'm not going to say that it's not famous, but what I'm saying is that for the majority of big data deployments, we don't see Helix becoming like the central piece or puzzle. But I saw it in Pinot Helix and started to look more about Helix, and it totally makes sense in the way that it works. It's really fast, but any explanation that you would like to give us regarding why you guys choose Helix instead of other technologies that does exactly the same?
So this decision predates me a little bit, but what insight I do have is also like Helix works really beautifully for us. And I mean, the first time when I tried to dig into how everything is just working in Pinot, and I realized that Helix is the glue that's like orchestrating everything. I was pretty mind blown at that technology. And one of the reasons I believe that Pinot went ahead with Helix was one of the core engineers of Pinot, one of the main authors. So Kishore, who is also the CEO of StarTree, he is also the author of Helix. And at that time in LinkedIn, several distributed systems projects were also using Helix. So it was pretty tried and tested in large-scale systems already. So it was kind of the best and obvious choice at that time for Pinot as well.
Wow. Okay, now it answers the question, Matheus. It totally answers the question.
Now makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask the next one.
So Neha, what we can expect, what the news and the upcomings in Apache Pinot? What if they're gonna have joins, for example? What you can say about the new features and fix we can have in the coming, I can say 3-6 months, 1 year maybe.
Yeah, so joins, definitely. Joins is one of the... So for the longest time, actually, Pinot did not support joins. Then sometime late last year or sometime last year, we added support for just lookup joins. And then we kind of started off thinking that, hey, for such a low latency system, we are not going to add joins. And our story was always that, hey, we have this very nicely done Presto Pinot connector. And with that, we are able to people who want to use joins are able to do so with that, using that connector, because as we know, Presto has like full SQL support, and it is able to very nicely just offload what it can to Pinot and then just do just the final stitching together on the Presto side. But then from our community, again, we heard that this is something people want. This is something they want to see in Pinot. So this is still like an alpha feature right now, but a very exciting event happening in Pinot. So a little bit about that feature. So I was earlier mentioning about the clear separation of the layers, where we have like the query serving layer, and then we have the query layer, the serving layer. So it's called like the brokers and then the servers. And for the longest time, we used to just have this single stage query execution, where the brokers got the query, they sent it to the servers. Servers did some filtering, some basic aggregations, and then finally everything was gathered back at the brokers, and then the brokers had to do the final merging of the results and sending it back. And this works great for analytical queries where you do filtering, aggregations. The merging part is like very limited. But now when we have to do multi-stage queries like joins, this is going to pose some problems, because even after the initial filtering, before any aggregations, you might want to do more data shuffling or some local joins before you do like the final aggregations and projections. So that single stage is going to become a bottleneck. So with this recent joins work, we now have a multi-stage query execution engine. And this is going to not only help us support joins, but also more complex things like window functions, for example.
Wow.
So this is one of the things that we're excited about upcoming in the next, say, 6 months. Another amazing project, so upserts, which is already there in Pinot, but we're making like a lot more improvements and enhancements to it to reduce or to optimize it even more in terms of the memory usage and the time it takes to bootstrap and so on. So for those of the listeners who don't know, upserts is like when you update a record if it already exists, or insert it if you don't. And this was motivated by, again, interesting use cases that we saw coming from the Uber community, where they wanted to update the fare of a ride with a tip added later on, or an order event and its changing status, just be able to track that in a dashboard. So then this definitely is one feature, which is like a game changer for OLAP systems, because now we are no longer just a immutable data store. We have introduced mutability, and we're excited to see with all the enhancements, all the interesting things that the community does with it.
I'm just mind blown. Because that's a true game changer, as you explain about giving this capability to a lab system. It's magical because I can tell you by experience, for example, for our customers, we are pretty heavy on SQL. So whenever we just stand up like the Pinot cluster is pretty amazing. We have SQL capabilities, but sometimes they would like to elaborate more the queries, right? And then they ended up having the problem to say, okay, I like Pinot. It's just blazing fast. It's, I don't know. I just can't even know how fast the query are because it's crazy. We have like a couple of systems running production today, and we can do queries in, I don't know, 10 milliseconds. And that's insane. Because in Brazil, we have a lot of background on relational databases, and relational databases, they just, in the way that it's designed, we're not comparing because those are two different facets. But, they are used to get this latence like minutes and just like several minutes. But when it just narrow down to like 0 seconds almost, they just, get like without no words. But since we are pretty SQL heavy, and we face the problem to say, okay, Pinot doesn't offer the full-blown capability of SQL. Yeah. So what we're going to do to solve this problem, we're going to either spin up Press or Trino on top of that. And then we use Trino to query Pinot, and it works pretty great. However, we have to deal with another deployment, another workload, another deployment, another process. And that brings more complexity on the overall spectrum of the deployment per se. So just like we do that for ClickHouse, we do for Druid, and we do for any OLAP systems because they're pretty limited on the query interface. But now you giving us this, mind-blowing explanation to have the capability now to bring more SQL and make joins. That's fantastic. That's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, and what you described is exactly what the sentiments that people share, that hey, this is now yet another system for us to deploy and manage. And on similar lines, like this similar operational overhead, another wonderful effort that is happening in Apache Pinot. But disclaimer, this is currently still all in StarTree Cloud, is the tiered storage. So the story with tiered storage is that people love Pinot, people love the speed of Pinot, and they want to keep data in Pinot like just forever and forever. But because there's like two kinds of systems. There's like tightly coupled systems like Pinot used to be, where you kind of keep data locally onto the Pinot servers. And because of that, we're able to kind of mmap the segments and kind of just serve the data super fast. That's how we get the low latencies. But because it's tightly coupled and you have to kind of keep adding storage, a lot of storage as your data grows. So the cost kind of becomes too much beyond a certain point. And then there's these other end of the spectrum systems like Snowflake, where all the data is in the cloud, but then because of that, the latency, of course, is going to be much slower. And those are like the decoupled systems. And then people who wanted to keep all their data in Pinot beyond a point, it just gets too costly. So then they end up introducing a system like Snowflake or a system like Presto. And then you have to have query federation because you want to be able to query this as if it's one data source. So for this, we started this tiered storage project effort, where we are now able to choose exactly which portion of the data you want to keep in Pinot in tightly coupled mode, locally bound to the SSD or disk. And then you have full control to configure that, hey, beyond, say, 7 days, I still want it in Pinot, but I perhaps don't care about ultra low latency and milliseconds SLAs. This data is older, so I am okay with it paying a little penalty for latency, but I just want to bring the cost down. So now you can do this with tier storage still in Pinot. You can offload some of your data that you choose to, say, S3, and query all of it as if it was one Pinot table.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think you said something pretty nice. I have seen customers depending on Snowflake or BigQuery or system like that, they can just manage storage pretty beautifully. And they totally underneath the hood just use this capability to tier the storage. And but I do have like intriguing questions. So the tiered storage on Pinot's case is just based on the segment per se, or it goes way deep on the segment. So you can choose, for example, in that segment, I want that specific range of data to be offloaded, or no, it's just per segment basis.
That's a great question. So it does go deeper. You can say that time-based, that just these beyond 7 days, all segments go, or like beyond your choice of time, all segments go to cloud, these stay on to local. Or you can say exactly these segments go to cloud, these stay on local. Or you can go even deeper and say these specific columns, or even deeper and say only this index of this column should stay local and everything goes onto cloud. So for instance, we saw one use case where they were heavily using Bloom filters to prune out the amount of segments that they ended up querying. So we decided that, hey, for all those Bloom filters, let's pin them or let's keep them locally, and then everything else can be on the cloud. So you have like super granular control on what goes where.
That's insane. That's really insane.
Yeah.
Wow. And for example, if you query the two places, either SSD and I would say the tiered storage that's sitting on S3, we are able to combine the query automatically out of the gate and just bring the result back to the customer.
Yes, you would, like as an end user, you would not see any difference from your query experience perspective.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's a work in progress, right?
The alpha feature has been rolled out. There's also like a little blog published by StarTree about it. And now we're in the process of just scaling it and getting the best throughput out of it and just making it even better.
Yeah, do you have any comments, Matheus?
Yeah, just want to play with it. I just want to put my hands on it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think we talk a little bit about what is upcoming. And I think we would like to know, I mean, when you said about the integrations, when you guys made it easier for people to tap into and add more integrations, I would assume that for some reason you're just using like interfaces to make it easier for people to tap into and add integrations. Like internally, how you guys handle that, right?
Yes, so that is absolutely right. We kind of formed very clean interfaces and we kind of put them into this. We created layers in the Pinot project. We call the middle layer as the SPI layer, where we have put all the interfaces for real-time ingestion or for what storage layer means, so any interface about that. And then we have this plugin layer where any sort of plugin that you use, that you build using that interfaces comes into that plugin layer. And now with this, it becomes very easy for you to add plugins and also for you to selectively just say that in my deployment, these are the plugins that I will add. I don't want, let's say, any dependencies about Avro because I'm just using JSON with Kafka and say S3. So you can remove everything else.
That's a big work. That's a big job. To make that, I would assume that would be big. Regarding the ingestion systems, I know that we have Kinesis, we have PubSub, we have Kafka, and we have others. Again, you can bring data either online and offline. But have you seen people starting to adopt Pulsar? And if you guys are targeting to have like a full integration between Pulsar and Pinot?
So we already do have a Pulsar connector. About sometime, I think last year, soon after we added Kinesis support, we also added Pulsar support. We are seeing a few people do kind of end-to-end stacks using Pulsar. And yeah, while it's few, I'm definitely seeing it is growing. We were also able to recently make a nice recipe using AstraDB and Pinot, like a connector, because AstraDB kind of puts events into Pulsar for their change data capture. So yes, we are seeing adoption, and we are also aware of some use cases that we'll be able to unlock because of our support for Pulsar.
Okay. And I think the last question that I would be, not only me, super interested to know, I mean, it's how StarTree is just helping, in this analytics journey. So we are super interested to know how StarTree are you looking, like did this 360 view, just look at the market, understood how you can just attend different use cases, not only for big and like gigantic companies, but for small and mid-sized companies. And how do you think is the role of StarTree today?
Yeah, so at StarTree, we are on a mission to help all users with their user-facing real-time analytics journey. And for any analytics, you have to go from event to insights. And now Pinot already kind of helps you go from event to insights. But at StarTree, we can help you go from your event to insights in the fastest possible way and in the easiest possible way. So to help users reduce the time that it takes to get events into insights, and also really hide all the complexities that come along the way. So now there's these two parts to the journey of an event. The first would be getting that event into Pinot, and then the second would be just managing that event in Pinot and getting the most out of it. So for the first part, getting the data into Pinot. So Pinot is a derived system. The event doesn't originate there. Usually they originate in some external systems like a data lake or a streaming system or a data warehouse, sometimes in OLTP databases. And it has to be then ingested into Pinot. So in open source, we do have connectors like, say, for Kafka, Kinesis. We have support for some data lakes. But then for the offline ingestion, users in open source, users have to write their own batch ingestion jobs using like Spark or MapReduce, and then push that data into Pinot. And then if your data was in, say, a data warehouse or an OLTP database, you would need to invest in some ETL tools to bring that data into a streaming system or a data lake that Pinot understands. So OSS doesn't provide all the things needed for easily moving data from the various sources into Pinot. And it involves, again, external systems and operational overheads. So with StarTree Cloud, our vision is that you will simply be able to point to any data source and get that data into Pinot. So the goal is that you should not need any systems in between. So for this, we have added a lot of connectors. For example, one category of connectors is the data warehouses. So we have like a connector for SQL systems. So let's say your data was in Snowflake or BigQuery, then you don't have to write an ETL job. We have a way to natively just pull data from these systems. We also have a way to natively pull data from data lakes, so you don't have to write a batch job. And then for all of these in general, we have this nice little application for easy data modeling and transformations, where you can simply just say, hey, here's my data source. This is where my data is at. And then we will kind of show you a schema inference, a preview of the data, an easy way for you to add columns, add transformations, and keep iterating quickly, get a quick feedback loop. So with just a few clicks, you're like all set to get your data into Pinot and start using it. And then the second part of the journey is, once the event is in Pinot, just getting the most out of it. Because from like LinkedIn and Uber experience, we saw that Pinot can be extremely powerful and valuable, but we also saw what it takes to get the most out of Pinot. Like it took a certain amount of expertise to tune it and understand it and operate it. And there's just so many configs. So we often say that Pinot is like a Ferrari engine. It gives you amazing latencies and performance, but you have to build the car around it. So at StarTree, we are building the car. So you don't have to build the car, and you can focus on solving your business problem. And then our platform will take care of the capacity planning, coming up with the best configs, the best indexing, tuning it on the go, and just completely managing the cluster so you can focus on your business problems.
Wow. Yeah. And I think this is what the market market's going on. It's just like reducing the complexity to deploy, manage, and sustain systems, and just offloading this to companies that really does that, like engineers that created and manage this like in a day-to-day operations. And we are true believers that this is the path going forward, to see more and more companies just moving. And for example, I've been in the data spectrum for, I don't know, big data specifically for the 7 years from now. And I have seen lots of companies that they just did their journey from the bare metal, just moved to the cloud with the same infrastructure. Majority of the big cons, they do that. But eventually they found out that would be way better and beneficial to create a new architecture and rely on PaaS and SaaS systems rather than staying like in gigantic pile of problems, because, storage and processing, they are not decoupled. They're totally tight coupled. So it brings like a lot of problems, specifically on the billing perspective. So decoupling that and just offloading the system would be way nicer rather than having one single place of problems. And yeah, we have seen a lot of adoptions of customers going this way. And me personally, I don't have any doubts that as more as we get into the stream, as more you realize that you have to make analytics on top of that. And in today's perception of people, analytics is not easy, even though streaming is not that easy as well, because it's a different concept. It's a new way of thinking in events. But once people start to put their feet on the streaming, they realize, say, okay, Kafka is pretty good. I can handle 1,000 of requests per second. But all right, how am I going to do analytics on top of this? Because, now we have like gazillions of that data flowing through the system, but you don't know how to tap into analytics and have great access to that. So I think Pinot is this guy that's going to help you to build a complete journey of, having this capability to do analytics in such a scale that it doesn't seem easy, because they have the Ferrari, and StarTree is just helping the customers to build and, let the burden off from the customer and just, making people to have analytics. What is your comments on that, Matheus?
More and more, like I say, like it's not, the people think that it's not an easy journey to get this, to go to the stream part of the data pipeline. But when we go over and see that Kafka Pulsar is one piece of the puzzle, Pinot is another one, the more and more they are tied together. But as I say, people want to have less complexity as possible. So they want to get, okay, I don't want to put, for example, if I can query, that's the case, I think, that Neha was talking about, of join, that I don't want to make like, I want to make all the queries inside Pinot. I don't want to go out of Pinot to make queries. For example, Kafka is the one for ingestion. Kafka is the best for that, but he's on the ingestion, the storage layer. So everything is decoupled, but in some places, people want to go, okay, I want to use only that in the Pinot. And that's normal, because when you see like the blazing fast query as Pinot do, like you click and then in 1 second you get the result of billion rows. And then people say, okay, I want to do more. I want to work more. In the same of Kafka, people want to ingest everything inside Kafka. Okay, I want to do databases, I want to do the application. So I think it's normal to have this match made in heaven, to do end-to-end streaming data pipelines, to deliver insight, to deliver it. At the end of the day, we want to deliver analytics end-to-end. And I really, really believe, I was talking to Luan a couple of years ago, and then we're still talking about this, that we see this growing, we see the necessity of streams. Companies in Brazil, they start to understand that, but around the world, people already say, okay, I have to deliver a real-time experience to my customer. My end customer need a real-time experience. I want to see the analytics of my personal information right now. I don't want to wait like 1 day or 24 hours to see. I want to see that right now. So is it the real problem?
Yeah, and adding another context, Neha, just to give you like how the market works here in the South or in North America. It's like companies are now moving and leaning towards Kafka or ingestion, but we have actually, to be honest, not data engineers focused on Kafka. It's a bunch of developers. And developers, they are focused to use Kafka in terms of pub subsystems or stuff like that. Now they're realizing that they have to give these action items to transform data in action and actually to transform their microservices applications into a more data-centric driven approach. And then when they unlock this idea, they have to see data as an asset. They have to see data as the new gold, but they do not know how to make insights on top of that. So Pinot is just perfect guy that sits on that because you can offload the data to there and you can do action items, you can query, you can use APIs to query data from there and retrieve the result back to the application. And we start to realize that pretty slowly. And I think that more and more we're going to see customers just moving for that direction.
Yeah, definitely. Very well said.
Yeah. So Neha, I would like to thank you so much for your time here. I hope to see you in another episodes to talk way more from StarTree specifically, the features that you guys are bringing to the table, how it's easy, to connect your systems and just pull data from there and just put in Pinot. And I don't have any doubts that StarTree is going to keep growing and it's going to be a huge rocket.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Any comments, Matheus, to close up?
No, only thank Neha, only thank everybody that's listening to us. This is a really, really rich content. So, guys, from me was a class. I was like making notes. I was like looking for something when Neha was talking. So, make the same thing. Take your notes. Try to digest the information. There's a lot of information, a lot of content here. And I hope, like Luan said, to see you soon, Neha, in another episode to talk about the streaming data pipelines. That's for me is a passion of my data engineer life.
And I know that you guys having the conference that is going to take place in San Francisco. Why not maybe one day to have like a live or something in Brazil so we can not only speak about Pinot in English, but we can also spread the word in Portuguese and try to hit more public. Would be super ideal.
Oh, that would be amazing. That's a great idea.
Yeah, just count on us.
Definitely. I would be honored to be on the podcast again to talk more about StarTree. And this was a very interesting discussion, very fun talking to both of you. Thank you so much for having me.
That was my pleasure, actually. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you soon in another podcast episode.